surprising when I was going through some of the pictures of the funeral and reviewing some of the video footage. I realized Lasantha is based on also on what Lasantha's daughter has recently said. He was obviously killed because of his reporting on the MIG deal. And on the MIG deal, because he was very critical of individuals in the administration, there was a defamation suit against him at the Mount Lavinia courts. And Lasantha was actually killed a few days before he was due to testify. And Lasantha had told me a couple of days before that, Lasantha was not going to share with me any of the information he had. Thus, he was very competitive. So, although we were colleagues, we never really worked for the same organization. So we were perhaps competing to some extent. Lasantha was not going to share his information with me. But what he did say was that I am going to take Gota to the cleaners. So when I file these papers in court, it becomes public knowledge. It's in the public domain. You can use it. Now this he had told me a few days before his assassination. Now when there was a defamation case filed against him, there was a lawyer who appeared for him. And this lawyer did write to Gota Rajapaksa saying that you are not even worth 20 rupees or something to that effect. That was the reply of Lasantha's lawyer. And I was at Lasantha's funeral. He was also one of the pallbearers. But I was appalled to see the same lawyer now appearing for Gota Rajapaksa in the MIG case. So, I'm not saying whether this is right or wrong. I just leave the thought with you. We are talking about ethics. It's about our own community as journalists, and also Lasantha, the lawyer, and how did the legal community, how did they react, and how do they continue to work on this case, and what have we as journalists done to perhaps bring this to light. And maybe there should be some other discussion on that as well. So I leave that thought with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Everybody seen? I just want to share the personal side of what the character of an investigative journalist is. Because some people may form impressions that in Lasantha's case, he was a hard-boiled journalist who slept little, worked late, drove all of his staff, the journalists in the newsroom and features they have to do extraordinary work and crack the whip. But actually he wasn't such a man. At the Sunday Leader, Thursdays was when the features section would go to bed. And I was the features editor for 3 years working under him. And he would be there just to ensure the pages were passed. And on some evenings, he would be there till 5, 6 in the evening, and his children would join him in the editor's room. And on a couple of occasions, I asked him, Lasantha, how come you're still here? Because today happens to be the invitation that the British High Commissioner has invited for the Queen's birthday. Or on another occasion, it happened to be the US Embassy inviting dignitaries and journalists to a reception to mark their Independence Day. And he would always joke saying, Arwan, I don't need to go to a cocktail party to get my story. There was a very light side to the man. He would always play jokes on his journalists. Some journalists actually discovered their marriage partners in the newsrooms of the Sunday Leader. And I wouldn't be surprised if Lasantha conspired by actually checking whether somebody was having a relationship with somebody else to fix somebody else. So he had a very positive, bubbly, warm side to him, which was quite different from the impression you may have of the man who went after corrupt government officials, the political establishment, who he felt need to be exposed. And when I was thinking of how to discuss this issue of investigative journalism in Sri Lanka and where things are, and thought of presenting it within the frame of Lasantha the character, I was reminded of an analogy a Japanese academic shared to describe the rise of Northeast and Southeast Asian economies. He used the analogy of the flight of geese. Most of you probably are familiar with the V formation of geese. And he said the reason why some of these economies have done very well is because you have Japan as the head goose leading the charge, and behind them their influence enabled other economies, Taiwan, South Korea, and further down to Thailand and Southeast Asians to pick up. So the success story of these East Asian economies was based on the flight of geese model. And I thought of Lasantha and investigative journalism in Sri Lanka. I think the culture that he and Lal created in the newsroom of the Sunday Leader was unique. Because Lasantha had carte blanche, complete freedom to pursue stories, and Lal supported him all the way. So there was no publisher who was looking down his shoulder, bearing down, saying, well, this story is sensitive, we may lose business for this. So you had that element. But the more important thing is he had courage. And courage cannot be taught. That, I think, was the most extraordinary quality in the man. So to use the analogy of the flight of geese, he set the pace, and those of us who had lesser courage than him drew inspiration from that and did our own story. So I would constantly go to the north and the east to cover the conflict, and he was quite happy that I would go there. But it was not the investigative stuff that he was pursuing, which was corruption and the politics of the palace, but it was just what ordinary people in the north, in the east, even in the south, as a result of the JVP insurrection felt. So he had this willingness to let journalists pursue their craft, as long as we came back with a good story to expose. But coming back to the point of courage, as a result of Lasantha's courage, he actually kept pushing the envelope through his investigative pieces and helped define what other journalists who were less courageous than him could do. And if you look at what has happened to investigative journalism in Sri Lanka since his death, clearly the quality of it has dropped. Because you don't have somebody, the head goose, leading the charge. You don't have somebody who would, risk it all to see how much the people he's exposing will permit that. And as a result, the quality of journalism you see on the pages of the Sunday newspapers, for instance, certainly is of much lesser quality than when he was around. And that is because I think, I'm coming back to the point, he was a man of tremendous courage, and the fact that he pulled off some of those brilliant scoops that we at the Sunday Leader would wonder on Monday morning, how on earth did he do that, right? It meant that we also drew inspiration. But working at the Sunday Leader with a man who was driven by this courage also meant living in working in those newsrooms with a high element of risk. There were a number of times when he was physically attacked. There were occasions when his house was shot at. And then when the paper becomes a story, those of us in the newspaper had to pick up the threads of the paper and make sure we get the paper out, but he deals with the fact that his family had to be safe. But he came back. It was very difficult to put him down. And I think that once again was a feature that drove him. Amar mentioned that Lasantha had a political passion. He was a lawyer, and we all knew that. We all knew where his politics was. In fact, when he recruited me, we had lunch with another senior editor, and I told Lasantha, I know your blood is green, right? So let's get that out of the way. He said that is fine, because what the Sunday Leader tries to offer is a buffet, right? So we present as much as we can, courageously, with vigor, meeting all the standards of quality journalism, and let our audiences out there choose what they want to read. And these are qualities that I have taken on board, and many of us who work with him have taken on board. Since this was something that he never learned at university, but he picked up. He ensured that this culture of investigative journalism, courage, the need to inquire, to be curious, were all part of the Sunday Leader's birth ethic. Final point is, because of his politics, unfortunately, his competition didn't do what is very common practice in the international media. In many countries, if one newspaper breaks a story on a Sunday, during the following week, other newspapers would pick up the story, see where it is going, do their own investigations, and then the story picks up its own momentum, and there is a sort of collective coming together by the media to expose the issue of the day. Unfortunately, because of the politics and sort of competition, it almost became insular, that the Sunday Leader's investigations were not followed up by other papers, and what they wrote didn't. The exception probably was the Nick deal, because there again it was Iqbal Atas of the Sunday Times who took it upon himself to expose that deal along with Lasantha. And in a way, that was an interesting moment for me, looking at things from, I was in Thailand at the time, but generally speaking, if investigative journalism has to succeed, yes, we need the flight of least formation. We need somebody with courage to go out there, challenge those in power, whether it's politics or corporate, and define how much is possible, and those lesser courageous people can follow. Because that's the only way in which we can hold the political class of this country to account, hold the corporate class of this country to account, and ensure that things like the Right to Information Act and some of the more positive developments that have happened to ensure Sri Lanka's democratic spirit is restored since 2015 can be perceived. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raiza, Arisha, Amal, and Marwan, for those thoughts, for sharing your experiences, and giving us an insight to what and who Lasantha was. Please join me in a round of applause just to appreciate